Hey everyone, my name is Bethany, and the missionary that I'm going to be talking about is Darlene Deibler. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. But she was around like 10 years old that she believed her calling to be a missionary came from the Lord, and like from that point on, she was committed to where the Lord was leading her, and that eventually did lead her and her husband to New Guinea. And they went to New Guinea together in 1938, which is actually exactly on their year wedding anniversary. And obviously, like, knowing this time, this was right before World War II. And so they got there before really any of the actual like action and any of that was taking place, since they were farther removed. But that did change once Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. But before that happened, they were able to establish some of their ministry among like mountain village people, and so they were able to make relationships, make connections, and share the gospel with many of those villagers. And there were many who did come to Christ as well. But it was the time that the Japanese were starting to take over various islands in kind of this area of the world that they had to evacuate from this area that they were in and go to a place that the Japanese were in control of and just having their own command over. And it was at first that they were all staying in the same place, and then once the Japanese were really taking over, that was when the men were taken away to prison camps. And it was at this point that Darlene didn't know it at the time, but this was the last time that she was going to see her husband Russell. And it was quite a few months later that the women and children were also taken to prison camps as well. And she ended up being in those prison camps for 4 years while the war was going on. And she received little to no contact from Russell, and even at one point was told that Russell passed away in the prison camp. Like when she got told, it was the 3 months prior that he had passed away from illness. And it was through her experience in this prison camp that really brought her like closer to the Lord, and kind of helped her to rely on him and just his goodness and his trustworthiness, even through all like the hardships that she was facing. And she was able to be a rock as well for those that were around her, especially the women and children that she was around in the prison camp, and especially the prison camp commander. He was known to be a very harsh and violent man, and she definitely talks about various times when he would use his cane. He would kick and beat up people who would disobey or do something that he didn't like. And it was actually when she was finally told about Russell's death that she was able to share the gospel with this commander. And she didn't know, like, in that moment when she shared that something had changed in him, but she did find out later, like much later, like when she was coming back to the US after the war was over, and she was able to go back home, that he actually did like have a change of heart, and was starting to live like more as she should, as a Christian and everything. And so she definitely had a very big influence on those around her, and it was just her her constant trust and reliance on the Lord, especially through like all the hard things that she went through. Because even at one point she was taken in for questioning for possibly being a spy for the Americans, and she was questioned and tortured and kept in a cell that was basically on death row, but she was able to survive that and really kind of give the Lord all the credit for getting her through those times. And even as she came back to America and as she was grieving the death of her husband, she still felt that call to be overseas and to be on the mission field. And so it was quite a few years later that she ended up remarrying, and they both ended up going back to New Guinea and having their ministry there. And they were there for about 20 to 30 years before they ended up in Australia. And the book is older, so it kind of ends around there, but they were just in Australia by the time that they were finishing up their ministry. But yeah, I think the impact of Darlene's experience and just her life is very inspiring to me, and she was a missionary I had not heard of before. But it was very impressive to me just how much she knew the word of the Lord. And that was a very big thing throughout her entire like story and experience in this, is that she constantly had scripture and passages that were on her mind or would come to mind through any like hard circumstance or thing that she was going through. And that was what like helped her get through all of those hard times. So yeah, I'd say reading her story was very much a blessing on my life, and I definitely want to be like more like her in the way that she like relies on the Lord and is very much someone who has hidden the word of the Lord in her heart.